Chapter 1. Reality, a many splendored thing. The new physics has spawned an equally modern metaphysics. Robert H. March, Physics for Poets, 1970. Now, my own suspicion is that the universe is not only queerer than we suppose, but it is queerer than we can suppose. JBS Haldane, Possible Worlds and Other Essays, 1927. 20th century sciences have opened a Pandora's box, bringing confusions in an otherwise very complex matter, that of reality. Using our common sense, reality does not seem to be a puzzle, even though we may sometimes have difficulty assessing the reality of some particular things. In general, we feel that we are living in a real world, that we are surrounded by solid, valid objects and persons. However, the notion of reality reveals itself a complicated matter. Scientists, philosophers, theologians, and religious spokespersons describe reality in different ways. These thinkers have described surrealism, parallel universes, alternate realities, shadow matter, and reality operating in at least 10 dimensions. Kaku, a hyperspace, 1994. I have been interested in the problems of different forms of reality since my early years as a poet, when I discovered the surrealist movement in the early 1960s as a member of the Haiti Littéraire. I was 21 years old. Furthermore, according to the tenets of surrealism, I was reared in a culture saturated with surrealism and Haitian alternate reality. The members of Haiti Littéraire were not bound by the dictate of the guru André Breton, the founder of the surrealist movement in France, along with Serge Legagneur, Devertige, Roland Morisot, and the others. I heard the call for the search of poetry's source, the source of creation, freed of the shackles of literary conventions. It is evident that the new literature issued from the disorder of Dadaism, the poetic movement of 1916 in Europe, like an ordinary species born of chaos theory, and highly influenced by the discovery of Freud in reference to the subconscious, Larousse 70. My own inquiry led me beyond the source of poetry or inspiration to the realm of ontology, to the source of being, the source of reality. As poets, we did not have limitations. There were no faculties or boards, no synods, no or inquisitions to establish boundaries or constraints upon our explorations and their outcomes. Modern physics, biology, theology, and philosophy were given equal access to my inquisitive mind, and uh, and the result was Immanence's book of poetry. My total vision of the universe, of reality, is woven into the verses, particularly that of Les Hymnes Cosmogéniques. My friends of Haïti Littéraire considered these verses as one of the most beautiful poetic productions in Francophone literature. As a physician who studied medicine at the State University of Haiti and trained in internal medicine at the University Hospital at Port-au-Prince before emigrating to the United States in 1967, I faced every day in clinical encounters the clash between scientific reality and the Vodou alternate reality. Although many of my relatives had rejected Vodouism and were practicing Protestants, their mentality has remained Vodouistic, embedded in that alternate parallel reality of the African Haitian culture. It has been repeated many times in intellectual circles that Haiti is 90% Catholic and 10% Protestant, but Haitians are 100% Vaudouists. That is to say that the population as a whole shares the Vaudou mentality without necessarily being practicing Vaudouists or servants of Loa or spirits. The current thinking at the university, particularly at the Faculté de Médecine, was that Vaudou was the expression of anxiety neurosis, hysteria, split personality, multiple personality, hypnosis, or frank psychosis. Louis Mars, an eminent Haitian, an eminent Haitian psychiatrist, wrote in 1948 in the review Psyche in Paris, La psycholopathologie du Vaudou. Before that, J.C. d'Orsainville presented his famous thesis in 1913 on Vaudou in Nevros. The same subject was published in a monograph in 1931 at Port-au-Prince. Considering the negative press around the world, it was preferable to present Vaudou as neurosis or psychosis rather than something real, occupying some uncommon dimensions of reality. The most benign Vaudou came under the label of réel imaginaire or imaginary realism. It was not reality at all, it was pure fantasy, imaginary productions born out of collective anxiety or expectation of a better world. For the official religious institutions of the country, Vodou was not even a religion, it was witchcraft, Satanism, or it was witchcraft, satanic worship, something that was supposed to be eradicated from the country. In that sense, the official clergy of the Republic led a destructive campaign against the adepts of the Vodou faith. However, their victory was only an accumulation of destroyed artifacts, and the Vodou mentality remains unchanged. From 1960 to the present, there has been a progressive acceptance of Vodou as a religion due to the influence of ethnologists and anthropologists working in the field, establishing the links between the African religion, their ancestral cults, their mystery religion, and the body of belief found in Santeria, Cuba, Candomblé, Brazil, and Voodoo, Haiti. These religions issued from Africa, a sh- those religions issued from Africa share a vision of the world in which some perceptions of reality are at odds with our common sense reality and also with the presentations of reality given by the classical physical sciences and modern psychology. How do we determine if the perception of the Vodouist is real or illusory? The latter is true whenever it clashes with our learned perception. All common men and women apprehend the physical world around us and in us through sensations and perceptions. With our mature nervous system, when we perceive something, it appears as objective and permanent, as having an existence distinct and separate from ourself. The perception is associated with the idea of an object, an external reality, something out there reflected in our senses like a pure and simple copy of the external world. For some people, only one argument is necessary to establish the existence of an object, the mere fact that we perceive it. Let me take that again. For some people, only one argument is necessary to establish the existence of an object, the mere fact that we perceive it. Others think that in perceiving something, we automatically become conscious of two things or two realities, I and the other. We apprehend two existences simultaneously. However, that distinction between myself and the objects of the external world has been the result of learning as our nervous system progressively matured from infancy to adulthood. Modern psychology has revealed a step by step development of our sensations and perceptions. Our senses don't perceive everything in the universe around us. Our five senses have their limitations, their boundary conditions, even after they have reached their full development. The visual perception of an object, for example, is preceded by visual sensation, a reflection of the object on our retina. That contact produces energy or electromagnetic waves that reach the cerebral cortex as information amplitude that recreates the image of the object in our consciousness. Many disturbances can take place between those two space events, the sensation and the perception. People affected by daltonism cannot see green and red. The red appears black and the green is gray. In infancy, because of the immaturity of the neurons or brain cells, the distinction between self and an external person or object is not evident. There is a syncretism between the subject and the object. According to Jean Piaget, there is an absorption of the I thing into the other things because of indifferentiation between subjective and objective. For the very young child, dreams are as real as the events of daylight activities, and he accords the same validity to the real and the imaginary. From ages 2 to 7 years, he recognizes the coexistence of two disparate realities, that of games and imaginary, and that of the concrete world. But for him, they are equivalent. It is later on, from ages 7 to 11, that the concrete world takes precedence over the imaginary due to the development of formal thinking and logic. After 11 or 12 years, he is definitely on an even keel with the adult. Now, as adults, we, the common sense people, have developed a consensus between ourselves in reference to what constitutes reality. There are three groups of criteria: spatio-temporal, social, and intellectual. In the first group, the spatio-temporal reality is what interacts with us either by compliance or resistance, accessibility or opposition. This is the presence which is at hand, something we can grasp in the present. This is a characteristic the past and the future do not have, because they are in the realm of the imaginary or pure mental construct. Also, reality strikes us by resistance to our action, such as a stalled automobile resisting our muscular activity. The second group of criteria, the social, is the consensus of the witnesses. Here, the mental construct becomes more complex and elaborate. Reality depends on a collective choice created by a collective mentality. Notions of objectivity and object may change from century to century or from one millennium to the next. Things are considered objectives when they fit the gestalt or pattern of the vision or prevision of a specific civilization. Lucien Levy-Bruhl, in La Mentalité Primitive, concludes that primitive men do not perceive the world like Westerners. They have an alternate reality in which the subjective and the objective, are not in drastic opposition as they are in the Western world. Their perception has a different orientation. What we take as objective reality, completely independent of our own disposition, feelings, and likes or dislikes is intertwined or subordinated to mystical elements that we designate as subjective. In our time, the products of modern technology such as television, transistor radio, computer, and fax machine would be seen as witchcraft, magic, or miracles in medieval times or antiquity. The third group of criteria for the perception of reality is intellectual in nature. As the nervous system matures, the individual learns how to correlate the experiences of his different senses, such as sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. This is a very important criteria of reality, concordance of the senses. Next, this empirical element must be integrated into a coherent, logical sequence, such as a cause and effect. Spatiotemporal, spatiotemporal system. In other words, something is real if it is logically possible. Furthermore, that reality is subjected to more scrutiny when our intelligence, through reflection, comes to establish a judgment of external reality, of actualization in the present versus an illusion. The preceding overview of the preceding overview of the process of perception is what helps us live, act, and survive in the modern world. This allows us to eat, sleep, reproduce, study, search, discover, counteract our enemies, defend our values, drive a car, pilot a plane, avoid a collision or a crash, choose life and avoid death, enjoy a sunset or sunrise, a landscape, a symphonic concert, and admire a companion or friend or great scholar. These mechanisms are at work in every individual of the human species. However, these mechanisms, so far, have outlined only one level of reality in our universe. Even at this level, we can find a wealth of variances within its confines that go far from the very real to half real and somewhat real. There exist other levels of reality in our universe that science has allowed us to discover. Science has opened our eyes over our limitations. Science has opened our eyes over our limitations or the boundaries of our senses. A dog or a bat can perceive sounds that are not audible to human ears. The sense of smell in many insects or other major animals is highly developed compared to that of humans. The secondary qualities such as colors, sounds, smells, and tastes are translated into psychochemical reactions. Our everyday three dimensional world has been coalesced with time to form a space time continuum. There is a new geometry prevailing at the subatomic level or galactic level. What appears to be a solid, unchangeable state, such as my body, is in fact constantly being made anew every second. A newborn baby has 50 trillion cells, and an estimated 6 trillion reactions occur in each cell at every second. This allows the biological being to renew itself constantly. It is evident to all students of physiology and biology that there is a very highly complex intelligence at work in nature. The physiology of a protist, an amoeba, or a human being is a wonder of coordinated transactions of energy and information. Every organ concurs to maintain the integrity of the individual being. The kidney, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the digestive system, the endocrine glands, the brain, and so forth work in concert to perpetuate our existence. It is not a blind attempt. It is an intelligent, well thought out enterprise. It is an intelligent, well thought out enterprise with mechanisms capable of making changes to adapt to new situations and continuous assault from the surroundings. Science also helps us establish that there is an outside world independent of I, the observer. The various nervous systems in our ordinary world, such as that of a bat, snake, or man, open up different aspects or qualities of the world. All those qualities exist side by side in our level of reality. They are not make believe. Each nervous system interprets the out there reality, and all these interpretations are valid. Your perception offers you part of the total reality. You should not deny the validity of the properties revealed by your perception apparatus. We have to take with a grain of salt the statement of the British neurologist Sir John Zickles, who wants us to realize that there is no color in the natural world, no sound, no texture, no pattern, no scent, no beauty. My contention is that I am construed. My contention is that I am constructed by nature with a system capable of sensing color, sound, scent, texture, etc. in the ordinary environment. All of these are conceived to help me remain in existence. In my alternate state of reality, life and death are absolute. They are fundamentally valid. All the beings share my level of reality, perceive those things one way or another. If we move into another dimension, another parallel universe, we will face new laws and new objectivity. My objective facts are absolutely valid within the confines of my alternate universe. Malidoma Some, in his initiation's account, concurs with this view when he stated that what we observe in everyday life is not an illusion or a big lie, but a specific encoding of reality by nature at our level in the pluridimensional universe. Ordinary reality appears the way it does because of the way we are made. Science also helps us objectify the external realities in establishing their existence in the past before we became a space time event. It has established the existence of our solar system for a period going back 5 billion years, and that the cosmos has existed for approximately 20 billion years. Paleontology has revealed to us through various geological ages a reality of beings that preceded us for millions of years. The fossils of the dinosaurs, hominids, and Homo sapiens are solid realities that validate the past and the evolution of life on Earth. By the same token, these discoveries give us an inkling of what is awaiting for us in the future. The catastrophes of the past, such as ice ages, asteroids, comet collisions, are bound to happen over and over in the future. The universe of the scientist also deals with with mathematical realities, figures, geometrical forms, motion, atoms, protons, neutrons, quarks, leptons, gluons, and force fields, regulated by some equations. This level of reality does not fall under the scrutiny of our senses and perceptions. Nevertheless, it is as real and valid as our common sense reality. Next, we can move to the level of the artist or the poet's reality. This reality had become a no man's land with some poets of the 20th century. An initiation is necessary to penetrate the reality of the Surrealist movement. The activities of the school of 1924 in France were like that of an alchemist, a seer, a shaman, or a researcher of the subconscious mind and the dream world. They have become they have brought us strange manifestations of realities, and beauty has become very foreign to an ideal of Charles Baudelaire, where order, beauty, luxury, serenity, and voluptuous pleasure predominate. Les Fleurs du Mal, 1857. Surrealist painters have objectified their new reality in a very eloquent way. Works like that of Salvador Dali, Paul Klee, and Joan Miro have enriched our universe with their surrealistic productions. However, we have to remember that the artists who preceded them in the distant past, from the Italian primitive painters to the colossi of the Renaissance and classical periods, never gave us an exact replica of nature. Works by artists like Bellini, Titian, and Leonardo da Vinci have always remained a mental construct. In our century, Haitian artists have demonstrated their outstanding creativity in either the naive expressions of the Préfet Dufault, Hector Hippolyte, Castera Basile, the expressionism of Ernest Louisot, the Academia of Emilcar Simil, Lionel Laurenceau, or the School of Beauty of Jean Claude Legagneur. It is also important to call attention to the place given to Haitian alternate reality of the Vodou universe in the country painting productions. For many of the artists, the Vodou reality is more than a folklore, a fantasy world, a tourist attraction. It is a tangible reality. Another level of reality is offered to us by the philosophers, those attempting to at- Another level of reality is offered to us by the philosophers, those attempting to attain the ultimate absolute reality. Some, like Plato, while maintaining the existence of an out there, an objective world external to our mind, refuse to accept it as the absolute because of its transient, ephemeral characteristics. That changing nature is a fundamental aspect of space time. The sensible world, as Heraclitus said, is always changing and flowing. For Plato, the absolute is of a spiritual nature. It is the world of the eternal ideas, or intelligible as essences, archetypes of the sensible things. The objective world is nothing but a very crude copy of the ultimate reality. It is very important to know that for Plato, the ideas do have an ontological reality, existing per se in itself, outside and above our minds. For other philosophers such as Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the out there is not real, it is only an appearance. For Leibniz, it is not possible to demonstrate with absolute certainty the existence of the external world. The existence of spirit is a more certain thing than that of sensible objects. He came to conceive of the ultimate parts of sensible things. Those parts or simple substances are called by him monads. It seems that Leibniz came to this concept of by analogy of the soul. He frequently called them souls. Each of them is the source and the principle of its own activity. They are synonymous with the German Kraft and the French La Force, as well as energy or activity. We can also see an analogy with the wave function of quantum mechanics, the wave function being a mathematical interpretation of the energetic principles of all elementary particles. The photon, the electron, and the quark are bundles of energy or energy coiled on itself. Thus, the wave, like the monad, would be the true reality. However, in our century, Louis de Broglie has established that reality has a dual nature manifested as wave and particle. This is the principle of duality. Baruch Spinoza also came to doubt the reality of the external world, although he accepted the idea that the universe is divided into matter and mind, or mind and matter. He conceived them as attributes of one substance, God. It is not to the sensible world that reality and permanency must be attributed. but to God only, the universal soul. For him, nature is a theophany or an immanent manifestation of God. The general consequence of this view is that everything that exists, including men and women, is part of God. In this, we literally live and move and derive our very existence. Spinoza held that man's transcendence is to understand and appreciate the fact that he is a parcel of all, of an all inclusive pantheistic God. George Berkeley is another philosopher who brought disarray to the concept of the common man's reality. He believed that he believed he could show that matter does not exist. And yet the laws of physics are real. The major problem resides in the use of terms and the special meaning that philosophers accord to them. For Berkeley, the existence of sensible things is intimately linked to our perception of them. Esse es percipi. Their existence is dependent on perception. Perception. On the other hand, the existence of spirit is to perceive. Esse es percipere. If we call idea the object immediately given to the spirit or perceived by the spirit, then sensible things are just ideas. Berkeley has arrived at that conclusion. Immaterialism, because of his opposition to abstraction, he denies any reality to abstract ideas. Thus, the notion of material substance being an abstraction ipso facto falls into the category of non existing things. Material things can be reduced to clusters of ideas, but ideas cannot on their own apart from a mind. Berkeley does not wish to deny the existence of substances in any sense, except in a philosophical sense. Furthermore, having assigned the existence of things to a perceiving mind, he ends up calling on an eternal, he ends up calling on an eternal, universal, omnipresent perceiver, God Himself, to validate the existence of things. For Berkeley, nothing like an idea can be in an unperceiving thing. To be perceived implies connection to a perceiver. Only persons, i.e., conscious things, exist, as he states. Other things are not so much in existence as manners of the existence of persons. Nevertheless, there is confusion and inconsistency in Berkeley using the term idea, IDEA. At times he equates ideas with things, and at other times with sensations. For him, ideas or sensible things are imprinted on the senses by the author of nature. They are called real things and therefore belong to the rerum natura, the eternal reality of things. Finally, there is also the reality of the religious and believers. Closer to us is the Judeo Christian vision of the world at the level of the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Bible. The heroes and saints of the Bible believed in two realities, in that of our everyday common sense reality and in the ultimate reality of God and the sons of God or spirits. For them, the out there is not an illusion. It is not clearly said that the world was created out of nothingness in the first chapter of Genesis. The first verse makes a statement about the work or action of the Creator and the resulting creation, heavens and earth. But it does not give a modus operandi. method of procedure. The second verse speaks of a state of chaos, which is not necessarily the Big Bang. For the third verse, God is like the demiurge, Egyptian Ra, bringing order out of chaos. We can see an influence of the Kemet, or Egypt, cosmogonies, on Moses' thinking when we take into account the fact that he was schooled by the Egyptian priestess. And Job 309 to 313. Then God's command in the following verses unleashed the power of evolution in nature when he said, "Let the earth bring forth vegetation. Let the water teem with an abundance of living creatures. Let the earth bring forth all kinds of living creatures." The only direct intervention by God in the development and progression of life on earth was with the appearance of Homo sapiens, Adam and Eve. God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." In the Pentateuch, the believer's religion is of a utilitarian nature. They are in search of blessings in the present life. This is life. This life is transient, and man can perpetuate himself through his offspring that are flesh or dust, matter like him. Thou art dust, and into dust thou shalt return. There is no other reality awaiting the human species after death. He will go back to the eternal status of dust in space time reality. He does not believe in reincarnation or transmigration of the soul. He does not really believe in a soul as an entity separated from his body. His existence is manifested as a soul body, space time event. When he dies, the body soul manifestation ceases to exist. On the other hand, the early biblical men believe in another order of existence, the alternate reality of God and the sons of God. They have the ability to commerce with the ordinary reality by theophany or materialization into our space time dimension. There has been intimate contact, copulation between the sons of God and beautiful women they chose for their wives. From their union appeared the Nephilim, the heroes of old, legendary men of the stature of Hercules. Genesis 6 1 to 4. This is a union that God did not approve because 120 years later he destroyed mankind by the great flood. It is very important to notice that in the Pentateuch there is no mention of hell or heavenly paradise awaiting humans after death. The earthlings of Genesis mainly saw themselves as creatures of Mother Earth, from which they were taken and to which they shall return as dust at death. It was like going back to an original womb. Thus, true blessing was a long and happy life on earth and perpetuation through offspring. This explains the curse imposed on a barren woman and the importance of male offspring who can deliver the seeds of perpetuation. When God or his materialized messengers talked to men, they didn't mention transfer to another dimension or reality before or after death. The tree of life that was in the middle of the Garden of Eden had the virtue of giving perpetual life on earth. In the myth of Eden, Adam and Eve were allowed to eat the fruits of that tree, but they did not choose to do so, perhaps because they assumed they would live forever as long as they did not touch the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Genesis 3:22. But after their disobedience, God placed some of the entities of the alternate reality, the cherubim, and the fiery revolving sword to guard the location of the tree of life. Genesis 3:24. God did not mention a life in heaven to Abraham during his multiple encounters with the man of Ur. All covenants revolve around realities of our common sense space time dimension. I will make you a great nation. All the communities of the earth shall find blessing in you. All the land that you see, I will give to you, and your descendants will live forever. And your descendants forever. I will make your descendants like the dust of the earth. Genesis 13:15 to 16. I am your shield. I will make your reward very great. Genesis 15:1. God does not talk about eternal life in his covenant with Abraham. I am God the Almighty. Walk in my presence and be blameless. Between you and me, I will establish my covenant, and I will multiply you exceedingly. Genesis 17:1 to 2. The same pattern repeats itself with Isaac and Jacob. Genesis 28:13 to 15. At death, Abraham was buried in the land of his kinsmen. Jacob also was taken to his kindred. Genesis 49:33. Moses, the founder of the Hebrew religion, the prophet of the Torah, died likewise. Genesis 28:13 to 15. He was buried in a ravine by the Lord himself in the land of Moab. Deuteronomy 34:5 to 6. There is no extrapolation into life perpetuating in another dimension. In the Decalogue itself, heaven is not mentioned in the rewards of the blameless. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, inflicting punishments for their fathers' wickedness on the children of those who hate me, down to the third and fourth generation, but bestowing mercy down to the thousandth generation on the children of those who love me and keep my commandments. Moses, the mediator, reinforced the warning by saying, be careful, therefore, to do as the Lord your God has commanded you, not turning aside to the right or to the left, that you may live and prosper, and may have long life in the land which you are to occupy. The lofty ethics of the Torah are designed to bring peace, harmony, righteousness, and justice on planet Earth. The evolution of that ideal created the Messianic age, which was an era of new order on the planet and the solar system. It is within the confines of our ordinary reality in the evolution of the Old Testament scriptures. We can hardly see mention of a surviving soul living in hell, Eden, or on earth. In the book of Job, writing probably between the 7th and written probably between the 7th and 5th century BCE, we find an inkling of the resurrection of the body. For I know my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not another. This also appears with a notion of reincarnation, but as a one time thing placed at the end of the world at the latter day. In the book of Koheleth or Ecclesiastes, written probably between 400 and 300 BCE, there is no clear cut relationship or progression between the two realities, i.e., the spatio-temporal and the spiritual ones. For the author, the common sense reality prevails. Dust is the ultimate reality for us. Ecclesiastes 3:19 to 21 reads, for that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beasts. Even one thing befalleth them, as one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast. For all is vanity, all go unto one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, and the spirit of the beast that goeth downward to the earth? The possibility of a transfer from one reality to the next came later on with the prophets. The prophet Elijah was taken up to another dimension, to the alternate spiritual reality in a chariot of fire. Enoch, a great great grandson of Seth, walked with God, and he was no longer here, for God took him. Genesis 5:24. Ezekiel also had a close encounter with the alternate reality of the cherubim when he was transported by them from one place to the shores of the river Kibar. That experience scared the daylight out of him, and he remained in a stupor for days. Enoch's experience had no bearing on the religious life of men in his time and thereafter. Extrapolation by later generations concerning the passage from one set of reality to the other came in the wake of the deportation of the kingdom of Israel, and then that of Judea to the Assyro Babylonian lands, and also from the influences of Persia and Greece. In Job again, we find the glimmer of personal survival in a shadowy fashion in the grave and in Sheol. Job 3:17 reads, "There the wicked cease from troubling. There the weary be at rest." In King David's time, earlier than Job, the notion of a surviving soul is in doubt. For in death there is no resemblance, there is no remembrance of God. In the grave, who shall give thee thanks? Psalms 6, verse 5. Later on, the Ecclesiastes put it more bluntly when he said, "But the dead no longer know anything. There is no further recompense for them, because all memory is lost. For them, love and hatred and rivalry have long since perished. They will never again be part, they will never again have part in anything that is done under the sun." Ecclesiastes 9, 5 to 6. That glimmer of the resurrection or reincarnation of the dead found in Job appears in Isaiah figuratively as the resurrection of Israel in messianic time. "But your dead shall live, their corpses shall rise. Awake and sing, you who lie in the dust, for your dew is a dew of light, and the land of shades give birth." Isaiah 26, verse 19. In one of the Psalms of Asaph, probably written in the post exilic period, which is the 5th and 4th century BCE, the notion of a surviving soul appears as a passage from one set of reality to another. Psalm 73, 23 to 25 reads, Yet with you I shall always be. In the end, you will receive me in glory. Whom else have I in heaven?" The transfer of one dimension to the next, from one reality to the alternate one, became clear cut in the writings of Daniel, composed probably during the bitter persecution ordered by Antiochus the fourth of Epiphanes. The work was produced to strengthen the Jewish people in their ordeal. "And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to the righteousness as the stars forever and ever. Daniel 12, 2 to 3. The current Judeo-Christian reality of man was conceived by the Pharisees around 135 BCE, 135 BCE, during the Second Hebrew Empire, when John Hyrcan annexed Samaria and Idumea, Edom, to Judea. The Pharisees believed in a universal God, different from the purely national God of the Sadducees, and taught the doctrine of personal relationship with God, survival of the individual soul, and retribution in the afterlife in an alternate reality. The Sadducees rejected these as fairy tales and stuck to the ancestral psychosomatic wholeness that returns into dust. With the formation of the Talmud, which is the interpretation of the Bible from Esdras' time, 458 BCE, to the end of the 5th century CE, the reality of a separate soul or spiritual entity that survives death and the existence of the alternate reality of the great beyond became a certitude. The retribution after death occupies an important place in Talmudic thinking. Judaism accepts the reality of Gehenna, the pit of fire of Isaiah 30, verse 33, and also the existence of Gan Eden, a place of benediction, a garden of bliss. The wicked spend 12 months in Gehenna for purification and then are transferred to Gan Eden in the company of the blameless to enjoy the splendor of the Shekinah, divine presence, and eternal life. The Talmudic presentation of the eternal life is less drastic than that of the Protestant Church, which discards all idea of a transfer from Gehenna to paradise. At least the Catholic Church has the conception of a purgatory for venial sins and a limbo for the unbaptized. Thus, in the Judeo Christian traditions, multiple variants exist of the reality of the alternate dimension. Christianity, per se, is a direct offshoot of the Pharisaic Judaism of the first century. It also shares a strong messianic vision with the essences of the Qumran communities. Some of the figures mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls have been confused by some contemporary scholars with Yeshua, Jesus, and the Apostle Paul. However, it is most likely just resemblance because the writings may have preceded the appearance of the early Christians by a century or more. There are also some influences of the Hellenistic mystery religion on the development of some concepts in Christianity. The Logos is a case in point. It is the demiurge of the Egyptian and Greek cosmogonies. By opening his gospel with the creative work of the Logos and establishing oneness with Yahweh, the Apostle John had opened the door to Gnosticism. Paul, who was well schooled in the wisdom of the Gentiles and Greek philosophy, while being an authentic Pharisee, was taught by Gamaliel and brought into Christianity some hylozoic, all is alive ideas and the vitalism of the Stoics. For Paul, the cosmos is a universal consciousness awaiting its redemption through the revelation of the sons of God, the Christians. The world itself will be freed of its slavery to corruption and share in the glorious freedom of the children of God. Yes, we know that all creation groans and is in agony even until now. Not only that, but we ourselves, although we have the Spirit as first fruits, groan inwardly while we await the redemption of our bodies. Romans 8:21-23. With Paul, reality assumes a new dimension, a panpsychic field or cosmic soul, having expectation, hope, and suffering. There are also corruptible bodies and spiritual incorruptible bodies. Paul had experienced the alternate reality throughout of body travel or by direct translation where dematerialization and rematerialization takes place. The birth of Christ himself is associated with the invasion of our common sense reality by entities of the alternate dimension. Angels that spoke to Mary, Joseph, the shepherds, the appearance of Moses and Elijah at Jesus' transfiguration, the angels at the tomb after the resurrection of Jesus, the materialization of Jesus in front of the disciples in the upper room, and the angel that addressed the apostle Philip to go on the road from Jerusalem to Gaza, where he converted an Ethiopian eunuch to Christianity. Following this encounter, Philip was transported from the south to the north and found himself at Azotus next. Acts 8:26-40. Jesus talks of guardian angels and of the devil as individualized entities of the alternate reality. The apocalyptic concept of Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, is another Hellenistic contribution to the Christian concept of reality. The demiurge Logos is Alpha and Omega, the source and the end of the cosmos. Thus, the whole universe is an eminence of the Logos. It came out of the Logos, and its finality is to return to the origin so that we will be all in all. There is some analogy between this concept and the pantheism of Baruch Spinoza and the evolution of man and the cosmos toward the omega point in Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's philosophy, 1949. Furthermore, the principle of paradox of faith occupies a strong position in the mental construct of Christian reality. The faith paradox materializes expectations in ordinary reality. The Eucharist is a case in point. To the objective observer, the host is nothing but a piece of bread. But for the believer, the reality of the host is that of the body of Christ. A transformation has taken place where the priest utters the sacramental words. This is transubstanti- this is transubstantiation. For the believer, two realities exist simultaneously, like in the case of Schrodinger's cat, which is dead and alive at the same time in the world of quantum physics. The paradox of faith creates also the dual nature of the believer himself, sinner and saint, mortal and immortal, carnal and spiritual, corruptible and incorruptible, present on earth and present in heaven in Christ. He or she had gone through a process of new birth into another dimension, the alternate reality of the spirit. Christianity has made manifest a superposition of states in the baptism of the Holy Spirit. For this phenomenon, the believer is possessed by the Holy Ghost. His consciousness is overtaken by a higher consciousness. Here also the paradox of faith is at work, that reality may not solidify itself if the adept does not, excuse me, that reality may not solidify itself if the adept does not believe in the reality of the spirit or the possibility of the experience. This is probably why miracles, or rather paradoxical phenomena, are not frequently seen in the Western world. having discarded the faith paradox as a relic of primitive thinking. An entirely new reality is awaiting us when we pass from the West to the Far East. The mental construct of Hinduism and Buddhism shapes a different common sense reality, as well as a spiritual alternate reality for the sense perception, a perception of the world. The Eastern mind goes on to construct a variant of common sense reality which is at odds with the societal and universal order of the West. For the Westerner, our individual status in life is the complex expression of genetics and nature. For the Easterner, the actual status of the individual in life is determined by the deeds and actions of past lives or karma. The socialist communist theory of inequalities in life should appear irrational in their reality or frame of reference. A change of station or conditions in life requires a revolution from within, not by the upheaval of wars or armed struggle in society. Their mental attitude in terms of acceptance of their conditions is not like the resignation in a Christian context. They know that changes in their own deeds or karma will bring change in their status in subsequent lives. However, evolution from the Vedic vision, however, evolution from the Vedic vision to the Upanishads will allow change of status in the present life by proper training and conditioning, leading to the release from the fatality of the wheel of life. This is conducive to a democratic system. Those who cannot attain moksha, release in Hinduism, or nirvana, liberation in Buddhism, are stuck to the Vedic realities of birth, death, rebirth, redeath, ad infinitum. The hardship of an ascetic life, the disciplines of yoga to attain higher state of consciousness, and the restraints of transcendental meditation place limitations on the expectations of the believers so that the vast majority have to live within the confines of their samsara. All are searching happiness in their present status. Everyone needs food, clothes, shelter, love, caring, health, friends, family, children, law and order, good and benevolent government. This harmony in everyday life is dependent upon rituals, rites of passages, worshipping and devotion to the gods or to God. Reality then depends on the proper behavior of people. Everything has a proper place, function, and order in society, as well as in the cosmos. Improper deeds or actions can cause the entire universe to fall into unreality or nothingness. Thus, the ethical behavior of every individual is of the utmost importance in maintaining the cosmic order, Rita, and societal order, Dharma. The Hindu thought is keenly aware of the transitory nature of space time dimension. Change is the essence of our world. One of the major dimensions of common sense reality is permanence. Enlightenment consists in getting rid of that illusion, Maya, which is a hallmark of ignorance and suffering. We cannot get away with murder. We do not get rid of the past easily. Imminent justice retaliates sooner or later. Past, present, and future are intimately linked or intertwined. The present is the result of the past and is determining the future. Those different aspects of time are intrinsic characteristics of our universe, a dimension that is different from the realm of the gods. Their alternate reality crisscrosses Their alternate reality crisscrosses with our common sense reality, and there exist locations and objects where the two worlds meet. The temple, or mandira, is such a place or location where the two realities intersect. It is at that crossing place that the gods descend and partake of human offerings, and the devotees can ascend to heaven and unite with the deities. In the inner sanctuary of the temple, there is a circle representing heaven. At the center of the circle is a sacred pillar connecting the body to the construction within heaven, to the construction with heaven. It is similar to the potomita of the Vodou Humfor or temple, where the Loa or Vodou spirits descend to possess the worshippers. Above the sacred pillar is built the womb chamber, or Gar Bagra, where the deity is believed to be enshrined, and above that is the superstructure of the temple with a tower, or Shikara, the mountain peak. Like the Holy of Holies of the Hebrew temple, the womb chamber can only be penetrated by the presiding priest. Divine light is supposed to be emitted into the dark in the darkness of the inner sanctum. Walking around the sanctum is a form of communion with the divine. From the crossing place of the temple, the deities exert their benevolence. They protect the world from chaos and disorder. There are other artifacts in the temple that allow the passage of humanity to the divine, such as doors, niches, windows, and icons. Hindus believe that the deities descend to earth and materialize to take form through sacred images. Although the divine is ubiquitous, devotion is necessary to help give shape to that alternate reality that would otherwise remain formless. The crisscrossing of the two realities is such that seeing and touching the image make it possible for the believers to ascend to heaven temporarily and experience the divine. Icons also have a place in the intimacy of the home, so that the devotee's reality coexists alongside that of the deity. These icons, with their multiple heads and arms or elephant heads, depict an incomprehensible, complex reality. The creation of an icon requires skill, artistic skill, and spiritual devotion. The sculptor, Shilpin, requires intense meditation to prepare himself for the work of creation. Cutting a tree or quarrying a stone needs proper modus operandi, because in the reality of the Hindus, each grain of matter is inhabited by local spirits. The same belief is found also in the religion of the Loa in Haiti. Specific rituals in India as well as in Haiti for the cutting of a tree, part of the rituals consisting in asking the spirits to leave and dwell elsewhere. At the completion of the icon, a priest installs various deities to different part of the artifact by merely touching its individual parts. By a special secret mantra, breath of life is infused into the image. In Haiti, the gigantic Vodou drum called a soto is such a living artifact and is inhabited by spirits or loa. For Hinduism, there is a major difference between the sacred place of the mandira temple and that of the home. For the mandira, the gods are permanently present and they are awakened during the congregational service. But at home, the deities are invited as they descend in the icon temporarily. There is a daily routine of rituals from the individual worship at home called puja in Hinduism, where the deity is invited, bathed, adorned, honored, touched and seen. Like in the service of the Loa, there is a moment where the presence of the deity is felt. As we will see later, it is very dramatic in the Haitian mystery religion. In the puja, as well as in the service, Loa, dances are performed to please the deities, and food, drinks, flower, and perfumes are presented to them. At the end of the devotional service, the deity is asked to rest or to depart. The utilitarian aspect of the Vedas is still present in the devotions of the puja. There is a transaction between the devotees and the gods. The service is offered with the expectations of blessings from the deities such as peace, wealth, grains, and offspring, particularly sons. Hinduism has evolved throughout the ages, particularly around 800 BC, when the devotees realized that they were entrapped by the gods in the cycle of samsara. They needed liberation from rebirth, death, and re-death. The notion of moksha, released, release or enlightenment, appeared as early as the oldest Upanishad writings. Later on, around 500 BCE, some non-Brahmin thinkers, such as Jains and Buddhists, fostered the abandonment of the old sacrificial tradition of the Brahmins. The priests then had to do a lot of rethinking to prevent their flocks from embracing the new religions. One of their solutions was the system of ashramas, sacred laws consisting of four stages in the ladder leading up to liberation. These stages are student, householder, forest dweller, and ascetic. The last stage, sannyasa, is necessary if one wished to attain liberation from the vicious cycle of samsara. At that level, one could understand deeply the reality of the divine and have communion with it. The great metaphysics of Hinduism began with the experiences of the mystics. The Upanishadic seers taught between 800 and 400 BCE that all physical and mental activity is a reflection of greater cosmic processes. Moksha is obtained by mystical means and makes manifest the union with the ultimate reality, the oneness of Atman Brahman. The altered state of mind of the mystical trance revealed nirvana to Gautama Buddha. Nirvana is a state of no rebirth, no death, more in the sense of extinction or nothingness. This reality goes beyond the station of the gods, even the supreme triad of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, as they are hologram expressions of space-time dimension or universal soul. They are fractions of the universal soul at a higher level of manifestation. They exhibit all the characteristics of the living nature of the living universe and thus belong to the ever-changing reality of space-time for the Buddhist. They are only at the higher stations of the wheel of life. Thus, nirvana is a total collapse, is a total escape. Thus, nirvana is a total escape from the world of suffering brought on by desire and also from the realm of the gods. However, the mystical trance has revealed another variant of that same reality to the Upanishadic seers of 9th century BCE and to the Maharishi of the 20th century CE. The Enlightenment by opening the door to oneness with the universal one has also revealed that the individual soul, Atman, is just a parcel, a hologram expression of that wholeness. Furthermore, the Hindu mystics see the universe as an undivided whole. Its reality within the multiple variants is not plural, but one. There is no difference between the individual and the universal. Beyond the superficial self, the mystics have discovered the essential life, which is the real self. Have discovered the essential self, which is the real self. Modern thinkers in Hinduism see the universal reality as a universal intelligence, a panpsychic field, a universal field of energy and information. According to Deepak Chopra, that panpsychic field never stops transforming itself, renewing itself at every moment or second. Furthermore, the Hindu physician presents that universal intelligence as an invisible, timeless field or ageless field. However, the latter attributes would belong rather to eternity, not to space time dimension. Eternity is a concept that is remote from the notion of nirvana. Buddhism, a dimension which has no beginning, no end, no variance. It is the dimension of the biblical Yahweh, who is the beginning and the end of space time, but has no beginning or end himself. Thus, time is not quantified eternity. Revelation chapter 1. Modern Hindu philosophy states that the unseen world is the real world, adopting the implications of quantum physics and incorporating them in their ontology. Modern Hindu philosophy states that the unseen world is the real world, adopting the implications of quantum physics and incorporating them in their ontology. In fact, exploration of matter by modern science has revealed that beyond the atoms, the quarks, the leptons, lie the forces and energies that are not visible by our naked eyes or perceived by our senses, but they are real. Those forces are the essence of which visible and invisible matter, or dark matter, are made. But that does not make the invisible world the real world. Quantum physics only reveals to us that reality has two faces, a visible and an invisible one. The invisible forces change like the visible world. The perpetual change in the physical world made the Hindu seers, the Heraclitus after them, perceive the world as an illusion. This is also the assumption of the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum physics, following Bohr's point of view. Einstein was opposed to the exaggeration of the theoretical physicists. In fact, it is not the physical world that is an illusion, but rather our assumption of permanence of the physical reality. In fact, it is not the physical world that is an illusion, but rather our assumption of permanence of the physical reality. Impermanence is the truth about all reality in space time, the visible as well as the unseen. The world of permanence, eternity, is an entirely different dimension, inaccessible to us because it is outside our spatio-temporal dimension. We are fractal events of the universal reality, reproducing on a smaller scale what is taking place on a larger scale. However, we have to consider at all times our limitations. In studying reality, in approaching the universe, in establishing the characteristics of reality, we have to remember that we are using apparatus or senses that have limited capabilities and extent. Sensations and perceptions are flawed by boundary constraints. We should not speak in an absolute manner on of the non-reality of things. Furthermore, the samsaric text, the tenet in Hinduism and Buddhism, um, about the karmic effect in determining the individual station in life has been unified with the quantum tenet of objectivity. There is no objective world independent of the observer. In other words, reality is a mental construct, but the construct is done according to pre established data from which the observer has to make a choice. He does not create the objective reality out of nothing. Reality is a matter of choice. Even in the Buddhist wheel of life, there is a set of choices, 8 in total, from which the individual will make a choice. However, some other aspects of quantum mechanics let us understand some other aspects of quantum mechanics let us understand that the choice is not always a free choice. The choice is always predetermined by the universal field of energy and information. In our attempt to understand reality, we should not forget the fact that our perception of things can be disturbed by psychiatric illnesses, drug effects, or intoxication, and many physical or organic diseases. From the 1960s to the present, the use of drugs for recreation purposes has reached epidemic proportion and is now endemic in the United States. The era of permissiveness has opened the door to all kinds of experimentation in search of self fulfillment, enlightenment, and access to a higher level of consciousness. Hallucinogens, mind altering drugs such as mescaline, peyote, psilocybin, present in certain mushrooms, and LSD, lysergic acid diethylamide, diethylamide became popular among young people because of psychedelic or mind expanding properties. These substances cause a transitory toxic psychosis accompanied by hallucinations. Hallucination is defined as perception without object, an experience closer to the nature of hallucination and is common to every individual is dreaming. In dreams, we see, hear, taste, smell, and touch everything that exists in our world. On awakening, these perceptions disappear, but often we have a good memory of them. We believe in the Western culture that they are not objective or permanent, that some phenomenon occurs in hallucination, but in a fully awake person, and he accepts that same phenomenon occurs in hallucination, but in a fully awake person, and he accepts them as as objective or real. There can lay great danger for the person or people around him in bad trips, which are like frightening nightmares where the person feels they are being attacked by terrifying monsters, ghosts, or the devil, and where murder can occur in self defense, or the user jumps from a tall building to his death on the ground. At other times, the hallucinations can be pleasant, agreeable, and pleasurable. During my internship in 1967, I received a teenage girl in the emergency room brought in by her parents with the chief complaint of visual hallucinations. She was quiet, smiling, and busy having a good time. I asked her to describe the surroundings, and she described flowers everywhere. I gave her the antidote, recommended at the time, and let her rest. Half an hour later, I questioned her again, and she described everything in accordance to our norm. Before releasing her, I wanted to test her with the vision of the outside world through the window. She described some beautiful pink flowers in the bush below the window. I said, "You're not ready. We have to observe you a little longer." "No," she replied. "Come and see for yourself." She had a naughty smile on her face when I leaned forward and saw the flowers. It is worth mentioning that flashbacks or recurring hallucinations may occur after the use of the drug has ceased. Lasting psychotic reactions have also been reported, changing forever the universe of these people. Marijuana, cannabis sativa, popularly known as pot, acts as a hallucinogen in large doses. Acute adverse reactions may occur, and psychosis are sometimes precipitated, giving rise to variants of reality. Cocaine is a short acting stimulant that may be snorted or smoked or shot as crack. It can lead over a period of time to hallucinations and psychotic reactions. Typical of cocaine is haptic or tactile hallucination, commonly called the cocaine bug, crawling on the skin. Other stimulants such as amphetamine, methylphenidate, glues, PCP, and ice can alter our common sense reality. We should not forget alcohol and its delirium tremens that produce hallucinations of terrifying small creatures or fantastic animals, as well as tactile and olfactory hallucinations. Alcohol can produce a type of schizophrenia, mental illness, called alcoholic hallucinations, which is associated with vivid, accusatory, or threatening auditory hallucinations. In the 1960s, the use of mescaline and psilocybin became prevalent. Before that, in the intellectual world, it has been reported that the philosopher Jean Paul Sartre did some experimentations with mescaline under doctor supervision. The surrealist poets in Europe did likewise in search of total reality. Carlos Castaneda published extensively on ritualistic use of mescaline and his own experimentation with the drugs as a student in anthropology and an apprentice sorcerer under the tutelage of Don Juan, a Yaqui Indian from Mexico. Castaneda, in order to attain the state of non ordinary reality, familiar to the sorcerer, had to be schooled in the art of becoming a brujo, diablero, or loup-garou. Castaneda, 1968. In the cultural construct of the American Indian, the use of the hallucinogenic plants removes the veil placed on the alternate reality by the boundary constraints of our five senses. The mescaline produces a castanera bodily, produces in castanera the mescaline produces in castanera bodily um, physiological changes and hallucinations of all senses, and the acquaintance of an entity as ally called Mescalito by Don Juan the sorcerer. In our everyday commerce with individuals, we meet a lot of people having different realities than ours. We don't automatically think about psychiatric illnesses, except in some very obvious cases. Many of our conflicts with people arise from the crisscrossing of our different mental constructs. For this reason, psychiatric diagnosis must take into consideration the cultural background of the patient. In the Western individual, such as one reared in the United States, a diagnosis of schizophrenia can be considered if the person presents bizarre delusions, odd ideation, or magical thinking, superstitiousness, clairvoyance, telepathy, sixth sense. Others can feel my feelings, unusual perceptual experiences, sensing the presence of a force or person not actually present, delusions of being controlled with thought broadcasting, thought insertion, or thought withdrawal. However, in the Yaqui Indian or the Haitian Vodouist, some of these remarks are part of their cultural construct, part of their own reality. We will see later the epistemological problems, reference to limits or validity of science arising from the presentation of Vodou as neurosis or psychosis. Psychiatric diseases exist in all cultures, from neurons and personality disorders to the major psychoses of schizophrenia and manic depression illnesses. The content of their presentation must be analyzed in light of the cultural constructs. The content of their presentation must be analyzed in the light of the cultural constructs. A mental disorder, such as pathologic anxiety, can be associated with some degree of breakdown in reality testing. Depersonalization disorder, a feeling that healthy people occasionally experience, may become frequent or prolonged. Feelings of unreality or of strangeness, such as the feeling of not being oneself, looking in the mirror and feeling as if One were seeing a stranger, being in familiar surroundings, and interpreting everything as foreign or changed. In the 19th century, Pierre Genet described this feeling of irreality in in the disease complex called psychasthenia, which is a milder form of breakdown in perception of reality compared to the total disruption of schizophrenia, a term introduced by Eugene Bleuler in 1911. In psychasthenia, as well as in hysterical neurosis, the individual may experience feelings of unreality or depersonalization, leading to multiple personalities, such as the three faces of Eve, Sybil, and Morton Price's case of Sally Beauchamp's. When the Upanishad seers were talking about the reality of the physical world, it is physically probable that they were experiencing psychological disturbances induced by their state of trance. The yoga techniques of trance induction are capable of inducing changes similar to mind altering substances. Likewise, the vivid description of a world described by near death experiences can be the product of hallucinations. However, this is still an open debate. In depersonalization mental illness, the individual may report that to him everything seems false, both people and objects. I'm no longer on earth because I don't see anything that really exists. Things are becoming strange. Something is not as usual. The darkness seems to embrace everything. The objects are enwrapped in clouds. People are like shadows. Existence is fleeting like a dream. A feeling of nothingness overwhelms the individual at times, and the world appears empty, void of all existing beings. Thus, the conclusion that the physical world is illusory for those patients. Thus, the conclusion that the physical world is illusory for those patients. Schizophrenia is at the other extreme of the spectrum. There is rupture or loss of contact with our common sense reality. The individual lives by his own mental construct where autism, absorption in fantasies predominates. There is confusion of the objective and the subjective. Multiple second factors have been proposed by for the emergence of this disorder, such as traumatic environment, exposure to drugs, PCP, LSD, amphetamines, birth trauma, and viral exposure in the womb. To this list, psychiatrists add repeated transcendental trances and the voodoo crisis of possession. An analogy seems to exist between the statements of the seers and that of the schizophrenics. The physical body, like all material objects, is an illusion. There is no objective world independent of the observer. There is no independent world out there. A separate human self is an illusion. There is no Atman or core in identity to the human being. I is an illusion. There is no difference between the individual and the universal, between Atman and Brahman. Is the analogy illusory? Like the psychiatrist, we are using logical principles. Is the analogy illusory? Like the psychiatrist, we're using logical principles derived from ordinary reality. We are using a classical mental construct that predominates in our classification of reality as healthy or abnormal. If there exist alternate realities, then we have to reconsider our classification. Maybe diseases of the brain and experiential second factors, including transcendental meditation and crisis of possession, open windows and doors into the other dimensions of reality, heretofore closed to our sense perceptions by boundary constraints. At this point, quantum physics may come at our rescue. The next chapter will give us a brief overview of that bizarre science and its reality that is queerer than we can suppose.